At 9 p.m. on an ordinary Tuesday, the illusion of my comfortable family life shattered with a single vibration. My daughter's message flashed on the screen. 7 words intended for her husband, but delivered to me. When will that old hag finally die? I did not scream or weep. I simply froze. Staring at the glowing screen, I realized the old hag was me, and my death was the only inheritance she was waiting for. My name is Rosalind Keene. To the neighbors in Willow Creek, Colorado, I am just the quiet widow at number 42, the one who was lucky enough to have her devoted daughter and son-in-law move in after her husband passed. They see a frail woman who needs care. They do not see the former chief financial officer of Orion Vista Systems who spent 30 years staring down board members and balancing ledgers that held the livelihoods of thousands. I was sitting on my beige sofa, a wool blanket tucked over my knees, the blue light of my laptop reflecting in my bifocals. It was a Tuesday evening, quiet and unassuming. I was reviewing the quarterly performance of my diversified pension portfolio, noting a 3% increase in the low-risk bonds. My mind was sharp, clear, and focused on the numbers. Then my phone vibrated on the armrest. The screen lit up with a notification from Lydia. I frowned, wondering why she was texting me when she was only 2 rooms away in the kitchen. I slid the device open. The message was short, brutal, and illuminating. When will that old hag finally die? I'm tired of walking on eggshells around her. The world did not stop. My heart did not skip a beat. My hands, resting on the soft wool, did not tremble. Instead, a familiar sensation washed over me, one I had not felt since my days in the corporate boardroom when a discrepancy appeared in the fiscal reports. It was the total suspension of emotion. I went cold. I became an auditor again. I looked at the words not as an insult, but as data. The old hag was me. And clearly, my daughter was not inquiring about my health. She was inquiring about the timeline of my expiration. I tapped the screen, scrolling up slightly. It was immediately obvious that this message was intended for Patrick, my son-in-law. The text thread, which I had previously thought was just for grocery lists and weather updates, revealed a fragment of conversation I had missed earlier because I had been napping. There were messages from earlier that afternoon. She still refuses to sign the transfer deed. Lydia had written at 4 p.m. We need to look into that assisted living facility on the north side, the one with the lockdown unit. I set the phone down on the cushion beside me. Face up. Down the hall. The faint clatter of ceramic plates being stacked in the dishwasher drifted toward me. From the master bedroom upstairs, which used to be mine and Colin's, I could hear the muffled bass of the television where Patrick was likely watching sports. I sat in the living room of the house I had paid for, the house I had designed, and I felt completely erased. It was as if I were already dead, a ghost haunting the periphery of their lives. I looked around the room with fresh eyes. My favorite reading chair, a high-backed leather wingback, had been pushed awkwardly into the corner to make room for a new, modern shelving unit filled with Lydia's decorative vases. I looked at the fireplace mantel. The silver-framed photograph of Colin, the one taken during our 20th anniversary trip to Italy, was gone. In its place stood a framed print of a geometric abstract shape that matched Lydia's new curtains. The signs had been there all along. I remembered the heavy sighs when I took too long to finish my dinner. I recalled the way conversation stopped abruptly when I entered a room. I thought of the dinner parties they hosted where I was introduced, and then gently guided to my room to rest before the appetizers were even served. I had interpreted these things as concern for my age. Now I saw them for what they were. Contempt. I needed a glass of water. My throat felt like dry parchment. I stood up, my joints protesting slightly, and walked silently toward the kitchen. The hallway rug dampened my footsteps. I stopped just before the archway. Lydia was standing by the sink, her back to me. She was holding her phone to her ear, her posture tense. "I know. Patrick. I know," she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. "But she is just so lingering. I don't know how much longer I can fake this smile. Every time she talks about her garden, I want to scream." She paused, listening to whatever Patrick was saying on the other end, likely from the bedroom upstairs. "Yeah, well, the stubborn old woman has the constitution of an ox." She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Just stick to the plan. We get the signature by the end of the month." She did not turn around. She did not know I was standing 10 feet away, watching the daughter I had raised, the daughter whose tuition I had paid, whose tears I had dried. I turned around and walked back to the living room. I sat down and picked up my phone. I took a screenshot of the text message. Then I opened my email app and composed a new message to my private, encrypted account. I attached the image. In the subject line, I typed a single word: evidence. I hit send and watched the progress bar complete. "All right, daughter," I whispered to the empty room, my voice steady and devoid of warmth. "Now it's my turn to calculate." The text message glowing on my lap was not an isolated incident. It was merely the final punctuation mark on a sentence that had been written slowly over the last 5 years. My mind drifted back to the months following Colin's funeral. The silence in the house had been deafening back then, matched only by the silence in my office at Orion Vista Systems. They called it restructuring, a polite corporate term for pushing out anyone over 50 who commanded a high salary. I took the severance package, a generous sum that could sustain a modest lifestyle for decades. And I decided to retreat into the sanctuary Colin and I had built. This house was not just timber and stone. It was 40 years of marriage. It was the pencil marks on the pantry doorframe measuring Lydia's height. That was when Lydia descended. "Mum, you can't possibly stay here all alone," she had said, clutching my hand across the kitchen table, her eyes wide with what I mistook for concern. "Let Patrick and me move in. Just to take care of you. We'll handle the maintenance, the yard, everything." It sounded like salvation. It was actually an invasion. Patrick had a different approach. He did not talk about care. He talked about assets. I remember him standing in my living room, tapping his knuckles against the wall. "This place is a gold mine. Rosalind," he had said, his eyes scanning the square footage. "It is just dead capital sitting here. If we refinanced, or even sold and downsized, we could really put that money to work in the market." I had shaken my head, clutching my tea mug. "This is my home, Patrick. It is not an asset." In the beginning, Lydia played the part of the dutiful nurse perfectly. She bought a digital blood pressure monitor and organized my vitamins into a plastic container with days of the week printed on the lids. "I just want you to be healthy, Mum," she would say, kissing my cheek. It softened me. It made me sign the paperwork to add them to the household registry. It made me open the door. But slowly, the house began to change. It started with the small things. My dining room, once reserved for Sunday roasts and holiday gatherings, was suddenly occupied by a massive, black treadmill that Patrick bought but rarely used. Then came the furniture purge. I came home from the grocery store one afternoon to find Patrick hauling Colin's favourite leather armchair toward the basement door. "What are you doing?" I had asked, my voice rising. "It's just cluttering up the flow. Rosalind." Patrick had grunted, not stopping. "Plus, the leather is cracked. We're putting it in storage for you." Storage meant the damp basement where mold would surely eat it alive. Then came the campaign for the master bedroom. It was a war of attrition fought with feigned concern. "Mom, really, these stairs are going to be the death of your knees," Lydia would say, watching me descend the staircase. "You don't need that huge closet space anyway. The downstairs guest suite is so much cozier for you. It has the walk-in shower." I gave in. I gave up the room where I had slept next to my husband for 3 decades and moved into the guest room off the kitchen. I told myself it was practical. I was lying to myself. The narrative shifted outside the house as well. I overheard Lydia on the phone with her college friends one afternoon while I was gardening near the window. "Oh, it's fine," she was saying, sounding like a martyr. "Mum is staying with us for a while during the transition. It's a lot of work. But what can you do? Staying with them." The absurdity of it nearly made me drop my trowel. They were living rent-free in my mortgage-free home, yet in her story, I was the burden they were graciously housing. The cruelty became casual, disguised as banter, over dinner. Patrick would often bring up articles on his phone. "Hey, listen to this," he would say, chewing on a steak I had paid for. "Average cost of a semi-private room in a nursing home is rising by 4% this year. Yikes. Better hope you don't end up in one of those. Rosalind." He would laugh. Lydia would giggle and say, "Stop it, Patrick, you're scaring her." But her eyes would not be smiling. They would be assessing me. I looked down at the phone in my lap again. The tinny light of the screen seemed to clarify the last 5 years. The daughter who used to weep in my arms when a boy broke her heart, the girl I had protected from every harsh wind, was gone. In her place was a woman who looked at me and saw only an obstacle between her and a payday. This text message was not a mistake. It was the most honest thing she had said to me since her father died. "So," I whispered to the empty room, "I am just an old hag walking on eggshells." I stood up. The grief I expected to feel was absent. In its place, a cold, hard resolve began to set like concrete in my chest. If they wanted to treat me like a business transaction, I would show them exactly how a CFO handles a hostile takeover. I sat down at the heavy oak desk in the corner of the guest room, the only piece of my original office furniture that had not been sold or moved to the basement. I opened my laptop and logged into the banking portal. The emotional mother who had just been insulted in a text message was gone. In her place sat the chief financial officer who had once steered a tech giant through a recession. It was time to audit the most fraudulent department of my life, my family. My eyes scanned the transaction history from the last 3 years. I highlighted the outgoing transfers. There was a sum of $10,000 sent 2 years ago for Lydia's online vintage furniture boutique, a venture that I had never seen a single receipt for. There was another $5,000 sent last year for emergency inventory. I scrolled down, looking for the return payments she had promised with such wide, earnest eyes. There were none. 0. The column for credits remained entirely blank. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking softly. My mind travelled back to the years when Lydia was a child. Colin was often away on business trips for weeks at a time, building his career, leaving me to manage the home front while holding down my own demanding job. I remembered wearing the same winter coat for 6 years so we could afford the tuition at St. Jude's Academy. I remembered the violin lessons that cost $200 a month. I never complained. I never calculated. I simply gave. Because that is what mothers do. We carve pieces of ourselves away to feed our children. A sharper, more painful memory surfaced. Lydia was 22, fresh out of college, shivering in a hospital gown. Her boyfriend had vanished the moment the second blue line appeared on the test. She was terrified. "Mom, I can't do this." She had sobbed, her hands gripping my arms so hard it bruised. I'm not ready. Please help me." I did not judge her. I did not lecture. I quietly took the spare diamond anniversary band Colin had given me, the one I kept in the safe for special occasions, and I sold it to a jeweler downtown. I used the cash to pay the medical bills for the procedure she wanted, ensuring there was no paper trail that could hurt her future. We never spoke of it again. I absorbed the cost, the secret, and the pain. And this was my reward. The dynamic between us had shifted imperceptibly over the years. It started when Lydia began blaming me for her own mediocrity. She claimed I had been too safe, too protective. She told me once that if I had been a tiger mum, she might have been a CEO instead of bouncing between marketing gigs. It was a sophisticated form of gaslighting. I recalled a conversation I overheard 6 months ago. Lydia was in the kitchen with Patrick, laughing as she unpacked groceries. "Mum doesn't understand the modern economy," she had said, her voice dripping with condescension. "She lives in the era of fax machines and ballpoint pens. She thinks hard work is the answer to everything." It is adorable, really. At the time, I felt a sting of shame, as if I had truly expired. Now, sitting in the dark, I realized the error was mine. I had taught her that I was a bottomless resource. I had removed every consequence from her path, saving her from overdraft fees, bad boyfriends, and poor career choices. I had not raised a daughter. I had raised a parasite. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk and reached for a small, velvet-covered box where I kept Colin's old letters. My fingers trembled slightly, not from age, but from the realization of how right he had been. When we drafted our wills, Colin had argued with me. He wanted to leave a significant portion to our future grandchildren or a trust, rather than giving everything directly to Lydia. "You have a blind spot for her, Roz," he had told me. "She needs to learn the value of earning something." I had overruled him. I insisted we leave it all to her. I pulled out a letter he had written to me just days before his final heart surgery. He had slipped it into my purse. I unfolded the paper. "Rosalind, my love." It read, "If I don't make it, promise me you will live for yourself. You have carried everyone else long enough. Don't let anyone use your old age to bargain for their future." I stared at his handwriting. He had seen the vultures circling long before I did. He had seen the greed in Patrick's handshake and the entitlement in Lydia's eyes. I folded the letter and placed it back in the box. The audit was complete. The liabilities outweighed the assets. The emotional return on investment was negative. I have let them bargain enough. "Colin," I said softly to the silence, "it is time to close the books." The next morning, while Lydia and Patrick were still asleep, I made a call to my bank. I kept my voice low, standing in the pantry with the door pulled shut. "Yes. This is Rosalind Keene." I told the representative, "I need a full hard copy statement of all liabilities linked to my social security number, mortgages, lines of credit, co-signed loans, all of it. I am preparing for tax season early. When the digital summary arrived in my secure inbox an hour later, I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't just the house. There was a credit card opened 18 months ago, a temporary emergency line with a limit of $20,000. I saw my name listed as the co-signer. I had never signed this. But then I remembered a foggy afternoon when I was recovering from the flu, and Patrick had brought me a stack of papers to sign for insurance adjustments. The card was maxed out. The transaction history showed payments to online gambling sites and a crypto exchange platform. I needed professional eyes on this. I called Frida. Frida was a retired estate attorney, a woman who wore tweed jackets and had a mind like a steel trap. We met at the Daily Grind, a coffee shop near the Willow Creek courthouse, far enough from my neighborhood to avoid prying eyes. I showed her the screenshot of the text message. Frida studied it, her expression darkening. "It is not just about the house. Rosalind," she said, leaning in over her black coffee. "You had foot surgery last year." "Right. Did you sign a medical power of attorney?" I nodded. "Lydia said it was standard procedure so she could pick up my painkillers." "That document is a loaded gun," Frida warned. "If it is drafted broadly, she can use it to declare you incompetent. All she needs is one doctor to agree that you are mentally declining, and she can place you in a facility against your will. It happens more often than you think." My blood ran cold. "She wouldn't go that far. She texted her husband asking when you would die," Frida countered bluntly. "Do not underestimate people who are waiting for an inheritance. You need evidence. Rosalind. If you confront them now, they will destroy the paper trail and gaslight you until you actually do think you are crazy. Record everything." I returned home with a new mission. Patrick had installed a security camera system months ago, claiming we needed it for neighborhood watch. He had given me a guest login that only allowed live viewing. I went into the master server in the basement while he was at work. It took me 10 minutes to reset the admin password and redirect the storage to a private cloud account I had just created. That evening, I sat in my room with headphones on, watching the feed from the living room. Lydia and Patrick were arguing in hushed tones near the fireplace. "If she just signs the deed transfer to your brother like we planned, we are clear," Patrick was saying, pacing back and forth. "We can pay off the debt in Jersey before they send someone looking for us." I froze. They weren't just trying to take my home. They were trying to use my property to launder a debt Patrick owed to his family back east. I was a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. But the final blow came in the mail the next day. A thick envelope from Orion Vista Systems arrived, marked confidential. I opened it with a letter opener, my hands steady. It was a notification from the Internal Audit Department. Someone had used my old executive credentials I had foolishly written in a notebook Lydia had access to log into the pension portal. They had attempted to shift 40% of my portfolio into high-risk venture funds. The transfer had been flagged, but the attempt had caused a penalty fee and a temporary freeze on the account. I looked at the timestamp on the unauthorized access log. It matched a date when I was at the dentist, and Lydia had stayed home sick. I sat at my kitchen table, the papers spread out before me like a war map. The betrayal was absolute. They didn't just want me out of the house. They were systematically strip-mining my life. They were stealing my past labor to pay for their future mistakes. My hand hovered over the phone to call the police. I could end this tonight. I could have them arrested for identity theft and fraud. But then I looked at the empty chair where Lydia used to sit as a child. "No," I whispered. "That is too easy. If I called the police now, it would be messy. There would be crying, pleas for mercy, and perhaps a plea deal that would let them off lightly. I didn't want a scene. I wanted a checkmate. I gathered the papers and locked them in my briefcase. I would not scream. I would not fight. I would build a balance sheet of retribution so airtight that when the collapse finally came, they would be the ones crushed under the weight of their own greed. I drove to Denver the next morning for a 9 o'clock appointment. The firm was located in a glass tower that scraped the sky, a fitting fortress for the war I was about to declare. I had chosen Mason River, a partner whose reputation for ruthlessness was matched only by his hourly rate. He was young, perhaps late 30s, with eyes that assessed liability faster than a supercomputer. He was not there to hold my hand. He was there to execute a strategy. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk and opened my briefcase. I did not waste time with pleasantries or the tearful backstory of a grieving widow. I laid the documents out in a precise grid, the screenshot of the text message, the bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers, the audio recording of Patrick's plan to launder debt, and the internal audit letter from Orion Vista Systems. Mason picked up the screenshot, his expression unreadable. He read it, then looked at the bank transfer logs. "This is a substantial amount of exposure, Ms. Keene," he said, his voice flat and professional. "They are not just waiting for you to die. They are actively accelerating the liquidation of your estate. What is your objective here? Do you want criminal charges filed today?" I folded my hands on the table. The anger I had felt days ago had distilled into a cold clarity. "I don't want them in prison," I said steadily, "unless they insist on pushing me there. I want to secure my assets so tightly that they cannot touch a single cent. And I want to ensure my physical safety. I want them to realize they have lost everything before they even know the game has started." Mason nodded, appreciating the tactical approach. "Then we bypass the will entirely. We create an irrevocable trust. We transfer the deed to the house, your investment portfolio, and your savings into it immediately. You will be the trustee during your lifetime, but the assets are technically no longer yours to give away under duress." "And the beneficiaries?" I asked. "Not your daughter," he stated. "My granddaughter. Haley," I corrected him. "And the Colin Keene Memorial Scholarship Fund. I want 60% to go to the fund." "Done." Mason typed rapidly on his laptop. "I will draft a conduct clause as well. If Lydia or Patrick attempt to challenge the trust, or if there is any documented evidence of elder abuse, financial coercion, or failure to provide adequate care, they are permanently disinherited from any residual estate. Furthermore, the clause will trigger an automatic report to the district attorney." "Add one more thing," I said, my voice hardening. "I want to revoke my current medical power of attorney. Immediately." "Smart," Mason agreed. "If they control your medical decisions, they control your freedom. We will assign that power to a neutral third party. You mentioned a friend. Frida. We can name her? Along with an independent physician I work with. That way, Lydia cannot commit you to a facility against your will." We spent the next hour constructing the legal fortress. We prepared a dossier for the Orion Vista audit team, providing the IP addresses and device logs that would prove the unauthorized access came from Patrick's laptop, not mine. This would clear my name of the fraud while hanging a sword over theirs. "One last piece of advice," Mason said as he slid a stack of documents toward me for signature. "Start a log. Write down dates, times, direct quotes, and actions. If this goes to court, A contemporaneous diary is powerful evidence of a pattern of abuse. It turns their word against your detailed record. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name at the bottom of the trust agreement, the medical revocation, and the affidavit for the bank. With every loop of the black ink, I felt a weight lifting. I was no longer a victim waiting to be discarded. I was the CEO of my own life again. "We will file these today," Mason said, gathering the papers. "The county recorder will update the deed within 48 hours. The bank will freeze the joint access by tomorrow afternoon. Do you want me to notify them?" "No," I said, standing up. "Not yet. Let the systems update. Let the letters arrive by certified mail. I want the silence to do the work." On the drive back to Willow Creek, I stopped at a luggage store in the mall. I did not browse. I walked straight to the display and pointed to a sturdy, dark blue suitcase with reinforced corners. It was the kind of bag one buys for a one-way trip, not a vacation. "That one?" I told the clerk. "Going somewhere nice?" he asked cheerfully as he scanned the tag. "Eventually," I replied. I wheeled the empty suitcase out to my car. It was a promise to myself. When I left that house, it would be because I walked out the front door with my head high, not because I was carried out the back. The board was set. It was time to make the first move. Returning to the house felt like stepping onto a stage. I had to become the character they believed I was, a confused, harmless old woman whose world was shrinking. I resumed my routine with terrifying precision. I cooked pot roast on Thursday, chopping the carrots into uniform rounds while listening to Patrick complain about the unfair interest rates on his credit cards. It is just so hard to get ahead. "Rosalind?" He moaned, leaning against the counter with a beer in his hand. "The system is rigged against the little guy." "I know, dear," I said, stirring the gravy. My voice mild. "You work so hard." While they were at work, I was methodical. I gathered the original deed to the house, my physical medical records, my handwritten journals, and the letters from Colin. I drove to the bank and placed them all in a safety deposit box that only I had the key to. If I were to have a sudden accident on the stairs, the narrative of my life would not be left for them to rewrite. I began to plant seeds of incompetence. I would stand in the kitchen, staring at my pill organizer with a furrowed brow when I knew Lydia was watching. "Lydia? Did I take the blue one this morning? Or was that yesterday?" I asked, letting my hand tremble slightly. Lydia exchanged a look with Patrick, a look of smug satisfaction. "I'll check for you." "Mom, you really need to be more careful. Maybe we should manage your meds from now on." "Maybe you are right," I murmured. "My head feels so cloudy lately. It worked too well." They stopped whispering when I entered the room, assuming I wouldn't understand or remember what they said. But the cameras saw everything. Late one night, I watched the feed from the back patio. Patrick was pacing, smoking a cigarette, talking low into his phone. It was 2 a.m. "I know, baby. I know," he was saying. "Just a few more weeks. Once we get the old bat to sign, we sell the place, pay off the sharks, and I'll have enough left over to set us up." "No, Lydia won't know. She thinks we're using the money for her business." I sat in the dark, the iPad screen illuminating my face. Patrick was not just a leech. He was a traitor to his own wife. He was planning to use the proceeds of my death to leave Lydia. 2 days later, Lydia came home with a glossy brochure. "Mom, I found this lovely community," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Golden Horizons. It is not a nursing home. It is a senior resort. We should just go for a tour, just for fun. I saw the brochure on the counter later. Next to the photos of smiling seniors playing chess, someone had circled the text. We offer full asset liquidation assistance to cover entry fees. I agreed to the tour. I walked through the sterile hallways of Golden Horizons, nodding as the sales director talked about peace of mind. I noted the locked doors on the memory care unit. I noted the smell of industrial cleaner masking the scent of decay. I saw exactly where they planned to put me, a small, windowless room on the second floor, paid for by the sale of the home Colin built. That night at dinner, the trap sprang. We were eating meatloaf when Lydia casually slid a stack of papers across the table. "Mom, since medical costs are going up, the insurance company needs you to update your profile," she said, uncapping a pen. "It just says you authorize them to bill directly. It will save you so much money. Just sign here, here, and here." I looked at the papers. The font was dense, but the header was not from an insurance company. It was a legal template. I squinted, patting my pockets. Oh, dear. I seem to have left my reading glasses upstairs. My eyes are so tired today. "I can read it to you," Patrick offered quickly, too eager. No, I said, standing up and clutching the papers to my chest. "I want to read it properly. I will take it up to my room and sign it before bed. Thank you for taking care of this." "Lydia?" I saw the flash of panic in Lydia's eyes, but she couldn't stop me without breaking her facade. Once in my room, I locked the door. I photographed every page and emailed them to Mason. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Do not sign that." Mason's voice was sharp. "It is not insurance paperwork. Rosalind, it is a durable power of attorney granting Lydia full rights to liquidate real estate assets to cover long-term care expenses. If you sign that, she can sell your house tomorrow and dump you in that facility, and it would be perfectly legal." I sat on the edge of my bed. I felt a profound hollowness in my chest. They were not doing this because they were desperate to care for me. They were doing this because they had already spent the money in their heads. I was just a barrier to their cash flow. "Thank you. Mason," I said quietly. "Prepare the filings. We are moving up the timeline." I deleted the call log. I lay down in the dark, listening to the murmurs of my daughter and son-in-law downstairs, plotting my demise. They thought they were dealing with a confused old woman. They did not know they had just handed the auditor the final piece of evidence needed to close the company down. The morning sun sliced through the dining room blinds, casting sharp, imprisoning bars of light across the mahogany table. I sat there with my hands folded, waiting. In front of me lay the stack of insurance papers Lydia had tried to coerce me into signing the night before. When Lydia and Patrick finally shuffled into the room, yawning and looking for coffee, they stopped. The atmosphere was not the warm, bacon-scented morning they were used to. It was an arraignment. "Morning, Mum," Lydia said, her voice tight as she eyed the papers. "I see you. You finally got around to looking at those forms." I did not smile. I did not offer them breakfast. I simply tapped the document with my index finger. "Do you two realize that if I signed these," I said, my voice steady and low, "you could sell this house without even asking me. You could liquidate everything I own." Lydia's face drained of color. She looked like a child caught with her hand in the register. Patrick, ever the salesman, tried to step in. He forced a laugh, though it sounded more like a cough. "Oh, Rosalind, come on. That is just a standard boilerplate template. It is probably just a clerical error from the broker. You know how they are with paperwork. I reached into my folder and pulled out a single sheet of printed paper. I placed it on top of the stack. This is an email from the underwriter Mason contacted this morning, I said. He confirmed that this document did not come from them. It came from a legal download site, and the metadata shows it was downloaded to your laptop. Patrick, 3 days ago. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Lydia's shock morphed instantly into defensive rage. She slammed her hand on the back of the chair. You are so paranoid. My God. Mom, we have been taking care of you for 5 years. We gave up our privacy, our lives, to be here with you. And this is how you thank us, by treating us like criminals. We are just trying to protect your future. Patrick added, his face flushing red. I looked at them, feeling a strange sense of detachment. Their anger did not frighten me. It bored me. I have enough evidence for the police and the courts to decide who is abusing whom, I said, cutting through their noise. But I am still choosing the gentle way. For now. Lydia froze, her mouth half open. What do you mean? She stammered. I have revoked your medical power of attorney, I announced. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Frida and Dr. Evans are my designated proxies. You can no longer sign for my pills, my surgeries, or my housing. Patrick took a step forward, his fists clenching at his sides. You can't just cut us out. We are family. I am also taking over the bills. I continued, ignoring him. From next month, the electricity, water, and internet will be paid directly from my trust. As for the credit card you opened in my name, it has been closed. You will have to service that debt yourselves. That is manipulative, Patrick shouted, pointing a finger at my face. You are doing this on purpose to ruin us. You know we are leveraged up to our necks. You are trying to destroy our lives. Your life is your choice. Patrick, I replied, my voice cold. I am just taking back what is mine. Lydia burst into tears. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, but this time, the sobbing was laced with genuine terror. She rushed around the table and tried to hug me, falling to her knees beside my chair. Mum, please. Please don't be like this. She wept, clutching at the sleeve of my cardigan. I'm sorry if we messed up the paperwork. We just wanted to help. Give us a chance to fix it. We can be a family again. I looked down at her. I felt the phantom vibration of my phone in my pocket. When will that old hag finally die? Get up. Lydia? I said. She looked up, eyes wet, hopeful that her tears had worked. One more thing, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. In 30 days, you need to find a new place to live. The room went dead silent. Patrick looked as if he had been struck with a shovel. Lydia stopped breathing. I will not wait around to be arranged into a facility, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. The eviction notice is in the mail, but I thought I would tell you myself. I picked up my folder and walked out of the room, leaving my daughter and son-in-law standing in the wreckage of the future they had tried to steal. I did not look back. The official notice from Mason River's office arrived by certified mail at 10 in the morning on a Thursday. I sat in the kitchen, sipping my tea, listening to the sound of paper tearing in the hallway. Then came the silence, followed immediately by the storm. Lydia stormed into the kitchen, the heavy cream linen paper shaking in her hand. Her face was a blotchy map of rage. "Haley," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You left everything to Haley. She is 17 years old and a scholarship fund. You are giving 60% of our inheritance to strangers. It is not your inheritance." "Lydia," I said calmly, not looking up from my mug, "it is my estate. And yes, you have 30 days to vacate. The clock started yesterday." Lydia pulled her phone out and dialed Frida immediately, putting it on speaker as she paced the kitchen floor. She tried to use her concerned daughter voice, but it was frayed at the edges. "Frida, this is insanity." Lydia pleaded into the phone. "Mom is clearly not in her right mind. She has been manipulated by this new lawyer. We need to contest this trust." Frida's voice came through sharp and clear, like ice cracking. "Lydia, the trust is ironclad. Rosalind was evaluated by an independent physician before signing. If you continue to harass my client or attempt to challenge her capacity without evidence, I will personally file a petition with the court regarding elder abuse and financial coercion." "Do you want me to open that door?" Lydia hung up, her hand trembling so hard she nearly dropped the phone. But the real blow came 2 hours later. Patrick was working from the living room when his cell phone rang. I watched from the doorway. He answered casually, but within 10 seconds, his posture collapsed. He sank onto the sofa, his face turning the color of ash. No, that must be a mistake." Patrick stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "My laptop, no. I often helped her with technical issues. That doesn't mean—" He listened for another minute, then lowered the phone slowly. He looked at Lydia, his eyes wide with terror. "That was the fraud investigation unit at Orion Vista," he whispered. "They traced the IP address used to access the pension fund. It wasn't your mum's computer. Lydia, it was mine. They know." "You idiot," Lydia hissed, stepping toward him. "I told you to use a VPN. I told you to make it look like her. I thought I did," Patrick shouted back, standing up. "You were the one who gave me the password. You said she wouldn't notice until we were long gone. Now they are talking about federal charges." They were so absorbed in their panic that they did not hear the front door open. Haley, my granddaughter, had let herself in with her spare key after school. She stood in the entryway, her backpack sliding off her shoulder and hitting the floor with a thud. "Wait," Haley said, her voice small and broken. You guys were trying to steal Grandma's money." Lydia spun around, her face shifting instantly into a mask of false reassurance. "Haley, honey, no. It is complicated. Grandma she is getting old, and we were just trying to manage things for her." "You just screamed that he was an idiot for getting caught," Haley said, tears welling in her eyes. "And you are mad she left the house to me. You wanted to sell it." Lydia tried to reach for her, but Haley recoiled. She looked at her parents with a horror that only a teenager can feel when their idols crumble into dust. Then she looked at me. I walked over and gently guided Haley into the sunroom, closing the French doors against the noise of her parents bickering. We sat on the wicker love seat. She cried quietly, the way I used to cry when Colin was away. "Why did you pick me?" "Grandma?" she asked, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "I'm just a kid. They are your kids. I do not owe anyone anything." "Haley," I told her, holding her hand. "Not even your mother. I only owe myself a life where I am not despised in my own home. You are the beneficiary because when you look at me, you see a person. They only see a bank account. That night, the house was tense and silent. Around 2 in the morning, my phone alerted me to motion in the hallway. I opened the app. The camera showed Patrick creeping toward the antique filing cabinet where I used to keep my financial records. He was holding a screwdriver. He jammed it into the lock, twisting it violently, desperate to find the old will or perhaps some document he could destroy to save himself. When the drawer popped open, he yanked it out. It was empty. I watched him on the screen. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor, burying his face in his hands. The camera recorded every second of his breaking and entering. The good son-in-law mask was gone. The next morning, a courier delivered a second envelope from Orion Vista. This one was addressed to me. They confirmed that the unauthorized access was a criminal breach. The letter ended with a question, Ms. Keene, are you willing to cooperate with the prosecution? If you sign the attached affidavit, we will forward the file to the district attorney. I sat at my desk, the pen hovering over the paper. I could send the police to the door right now. I could have Patrick handcuffed on the lawn while the neighbours watched. It would be satisfying, but it would be loud. No, I whispered. I want them to suffocate, not explode. I signed the affidavit, but I added a handwritten note at the bottom I agree to cooperate fully, provided that all questioning is conducted via written deposition or scheduled appointment. I do not wish for law enforcement to enter my residence. I sealed the envelope. I did not want a spectacle. I wanted the walls to close in on them silently, day by day, until they realized there was absolutely nowhere left to run. The trap was not just shut, it was locked. The subpoena from the state prosecutor's office arrived on a humid Tuesday morning. It was not delivered by a mail carrier, but by a process server who knocked sharply on the front door at 8 o'clock. Patrick opened it, signed the receipt with a shaking hand, and tore open the envelope in the foyer. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching the colour drain from his face until he looked like a sheet of paper. It is regarding the Orion Vista pension fund. Patrick stammered, turning to Lydia. They want me for a preliminary interview. They are talking about wire fraud. Lydia. Federal wire fraud. He grabbed Lydia's arm, his grip desperate. You have to talk to her. Tell her to retract the affidavit. If she says it was a misunderstanding, they might drop it. Make her fix this. Lydia looked at her husband, then up at me. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time, her face twisted in a rictus of panic. Mum, please. She begged, cornering me on the landing. We can start over. I found a lovely rental apartment in the city, 2 bedrooms. You can come with us. We will take care of you. I promise. Just call the lawyer and tell him to stop. I looked at her. It was pathetic. She was offering me a life raft on a ship she had already torpedoed, solely to keep herself from drowning. I did not speak. I simply pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The audio file from the kitchen camera played, tinny but clear in the quiet hallway. If she just signs the deed transfer, we sell the place. Old Bat. Put her in the lockdown unit. Lydia flinched as if I had slapped her. I was just venting, she cried, her voice rising to a shriek. I was angry. People say things they don't mean when they are stressed. Mom, please, that was you when you were angry, I said, my voice devoid of temperature. But tell me, Lydia, in the moments when you were calm, when you were smiling and passing me the potatoes, did you change the plan? Did you decide not to steal my house? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She had no answer because the answer was no. The final nail arrived the next afternoon, on the 29th day of their 30-day notice. A courier delivered the court's confirmation of the irrevocable trust. The asset transfer was complete. The house, the savings, the investments, all of it was now legally locked away in the chaotic proof vault of the trust, with Haley as the beneficiary. There were no grounds to declare me incompetent. The medical reports were spotless. The door was shut, bolted, and welded tight. Patrick began to pack. It was not a tidy process. He was throwing clothes into boxes with violent force, cursing under his breath. In the kitchen, I heard the crash of a cabinet door being slammed so hard the wood splintered. Then came the knock. It was not the courier this time. It was the local police, accompanied by 2 investigators in suits. They were not there because I had called them. They were executing a search warrant related to the subpoena. Patrick froze in the hallway, a box of shoes in his hands. Mr. Patrick Miller, the lead officer, asked, "We need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding the unauthorized access of the Orion Vista server." Patrick dropped the box. I need to call my lawyer. "You can do that from the station," the officer replied. Another officer stepped past him and approached me. He removed his cap, his expression softening into genuine respect. "Ms. Keene," he said, "I understand this is a difficult situation. Do you require any protective services? Has anyone here threatened you physically?" I looked at Patrick, who was sweating through his shirt, and Lydia, who was trembling against the wall. They looked small. "No, officer," I said clearly. "I am perfectly safe. I have handled everything." Haley walked in through the open front door just as they were escorting her father out. She stopped on the porch. She did not scream. She did not run to him. She stood with her backpack slung over one shoulder, watching the consequences of greed play out in real time. "Dad?" she said softly. Patrick looked at her, shame finally breaking through his panic. He lowered his head and got into the back of the cruiser. Lydia collapsed onto the bottom step of the staircase, burying her face in her hands. "Mom, do something. You can't let them take him. Tell them it was a mistake." I looked down at her from the entryway. I felt nothing. No triumph. No pity. Just the cool satisfaction of a ledger that finally balanced. "I am no longer responsible for shielding you from your choices. Lydia," I said, "that is a job for your defense attorney, not your mother." That night, the house was mostly empty. The boxes were gone. The noise was gone. My dark blue suitcase stood by the front door, packed and ready. I was not fleeing. I was simply removing myself from the blast radius. The structure of their lives had collapsed, and I had no intention of choking on the dust. I walked to the door, took one last look at the shadow-filled hallway, and stepped out into the cool night air. The taxi was waiting. The war was over, and I was the only one left standing. The house was almost entirely empty when Lydia arrived. The echo of the front door closing bounced off the bare walls, a hollow sound that emphasized just how much space had always been here, waiting to be filled with something other than their greed. It had been 1 week since the police took Patrick away. I sat at the old oak dining table, the only piece of furniture I had left behind because it was too heavy to move and too scarred to sell. There were only 2 chairs remaining. Lydia walked into the room. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had texted about the old hag just weeks ago. She had lost weight. Her eyes were sunken. rimmed with dark circles that makeup could not hide. The arrogance, the sharp click of her heels, the way she used to look at me as if I were a stain on her carpet, it was all gone. She sat down opposite me, her hands clasping a cup of coffee she had brought from a gas station. "Patrick is looking at 3 to 5 years," she said, her voice raspy. "His lawyer is trying for a plea deal, but the evidence from Orion Vista is overwhelming, and my company, they suspended me pending an investigation. Apparently, using corporate email to discuss hiding assets is a violation of policy." I said nothing. I just watched her. She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. "Do you hate me?" "Mom." She was asking for absolution. She wanted me to say no, to tell her that a mother's love conquers all, so she could sleep tonight. "No," I answered, my voice even. "I do not hate you. I just do not trust you, and I choose not to live with someone I do not trust. But it wasn't all bad," Lydia stammered, leaning forward. "Remember when you had your surgery, I made you soup for a week. I drove you to the supermarket every Saturday. I did care. A few gestures of kindness do not erase a pattern of contempt." "Lydia," I said, "you made soup." "Yes. But you also counted the days until I would stop eating it." Lydia flinched. Then she let out a long, shuddering breath, and for the first time, she dropped the last of her defenses. "You were always so strong," she whispered, looking down at the table. "You and Dad. You were perfect. You ran a company. You ran the house. I always felt so small next to you. Even when I was 40, I felt like a child who couldn't keep up. I think I wanted to take the house because it was the only way I could feel like I was finally in charge, like I had finally beaten you. It was the truth. Finally, I recognized the insecurity, the shadow I had cast without meaning to. I understand that feeling." I said softly. "It is real, and I am sorry you felt small. But your feelings are real, Lydia, and your actions are also real. The court only judges the actions. Is there a chance?" she asked, a desperate hope lighting up her eyes. "In a year. When this blows over, maybe we can try again. Be like we were." I looked at her, and I saw the cycle waiting to repeat itself. "I do not want to go back to a state where I have to wake up every morning wondering if you despise me that day," I replied. I stood up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the single brass key, the key to the front door of the house I had built, paid for, and lived in for half my life. I placed it gently on the scratched wood of the table between us. "This is yours now," I said. "But it is just a piece of metal. Lydia, it does not open anything anymore. It just reminds you that you closed every other door yourself." Lydia stared at the key, unable to touch it. I walked to the entryway where my dark blue suitcase was waiting. I pulled the handle up. Outside, through the window, I could see Haley's car idling at the curb. My granddaughter was waiting to drive me to the airport. We were going to visit Italy, a trip Colin and I had always planned but never took. I opened the front door. The cool air hit my face, smelling of rain and freedom. I did not look back at the woman sitting alone in the empty house. I was no longer the victim of a difficult daughter. I was Rosalind Keene, and for the first time in a long time, the only person I had to answer to was myself. I stepped out, and the door clicked shut behind me. "Thanks so much for listening to my story. That was a heavy ride, wasn't it? I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Let's see how far Rosalind's journey has traveled. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, please hit that subscribe button for Grandma's Family Diary, smash that like button, and press the hype button to help this video reach more people. Catch you in the next one.